Welcome all. Thanks, Mahesh, for joining us as our sort of guest leader today. I just want to take a sort of leaf, and just share that we've been doing this within Bloom also, and it only seemed natural to extend this and do this for Arka, like Radhesh and we were talking internally. That basically, in these times. A lot of startups are and they should be hunkering down. Mahesh, I think the two dimensions we looked at is the two variables that you can control are your cost base, obviously your cost structure, but that also becomes very inward looking and can be slightly negative also, right? The other thing you can really protect is your installed base and look at the silver lining, right? Look at the positive side of this crisis, and which is upselling or new revenue streams. And I think both are very interesting and important to discuss. So we did the wider, longer webinars, which is really Radhesh. In some cases, we also opened that to the ecosystem, right, to the public. I mean, to the public in the sense non-Bloom, non-Arca founders. But then obviously we said let's look at cohorts and do that in smaller groups. So we had different themes, right from more inspirational leaders like Naveen Tiwari and Aditya Ghosh come and talk about how they navigated past crises, but then also got into the nuts and bolts of if you've got to take tough decisions like tough hiring related, I mean, like layoffs or pay cuts. How do you go those? How do you go through navigate those, right? So it's right from the macro to this. And I think with Arca, it's even more interesting and important because we're earlier stage, younger companies, right? More quote unquote vulnerable. But on the other hand, I also think that much more adaptable, right? Adaptable and agile in one sense. It's much easier to move when you're a small boat versus a super tanker. So that's the thematic and the construct. Rajesh and I were just talking, and Rajesh, I can touch upon the B2B, the corporate aspect, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mahesh, also with you here, I think one of the things we've seen is that I'll just touch upon this theme about the importance of connecting with corporates and why it's so vital to startups, right? It's known, a lot of us do it, but sometimes it seems like it's a nice to do or nice to have. So what I wanted to just touch upon, and I think this is a great segue to introducing Mahesh to the group, is um, in Silicon Valley, for example, corporates and startups speak the same language, right? In the sense that we see sometimes have come from Cisco, they're looking at a white space or some area in storage or infrastructure, and it's really the same language. And then they're funding a startup who maybe one day worked, earlier worked with Cisco. So they all come from the same cloth. I think here culturally and traditionally we've been very different, right? We've been at two ends of the spectrum in one sense. Corporates are basically built on predictability and let's say annuity businesses, and startups are the ability to take risk. I think what is really good is that in India also that's changed. It's got a long way to go, but it's changed a lot of positive moves. So I thought I'd just talk about some examples. I mean, our own Radhesh is a great example, right? Being key part of the IBM's accelerator and leading that charge, right? A large bellwether like IBM, but doing the accelerator. So, a couple of things. I think in the valley we've got Cisco, Nutanix, and then the whole Stanford and Sandal startups. I think which are cut from the same cloth. I think in Bangalore, especially, we're seeing a lot of this happen, right? With almost every second corporate having its own innovator and accelerator, right from Target to even the Mahindras and JSWs and of course Reliance. And I think Reliance is a very interesting example. We just had our own Now Floats get acquired by Geo. We just saw the landmark deal. Of course, although Facebook is no longer a startup, you also had Haptake, on the AI chatbot space and Embibe in EdTech. So Reliance has been very active and it's very healthy for startups. Um, so I think it is now the how to, right? If you talk about that is really important. That it's important to bridge corporates and startups. How do you do it? I think consulting firms and consultants and advisors, I think, have a very significant role to play. We've got good relationships with the Bains and the Accentures. who've actually set up separate practices for this, right? They actually go to the clients and they've been quite open in saying that we don't have all the answers. And the clients are also much smarter today in saying that, we just don't want your quote unquote consultant Gyan. We've got these open spaces. Can you actually can you connect us to those startups? So I think that's very positive. And I think that is also Radhesh where Mahesh comes in, and I know you're going to introduce him in a bit. I think a key part of that where I see senior folks like Mahesh also helping our startups is you need somebody who's understood both sides, right? Somebody who understands how corporates think and buy, and also how startups can pitch and position to them. Because finally, sometimes there's a huge gap, right? The startup founders go in, and it's all about positioning a very cool technology, but not fully understanding the customer's needs. On the other side, also, I think sometimes, especially on the older people who've been there for corporates for years, it's also been a slight not distrust necessary also, but what can the startup do? Let's build this. Why can't we build this inside, right? The build versus buy. And I remember, people thinking about this paradigm. We've got 1,000 engineers. They have only 5. We can do this better than they can, right? I mean, that whole respect for quality, right? The output. So I think partner for startups to partner with, and I won't call them consultants, but I'll call them mentors who've been there and done that and understand both sides is really critical, because that's when you can really truly partner versus just sell. And again, I think this is very positive. We saw GM bought General Motors by Cruise. Cisco has been very acquisitive, right, by AppDynamics, and again Geo here. So I think with that theme, this is an interesting situation and a crisis opportunity we have for banding together even more. Sometimes when you have a crisis situation, you actually can really look at and say, hey, what do we do? What's our core competency? What should we do ourselves? And where we can partner. So I think with that, Radhesh, I'll turn it back to you. And it's very timely and relevant that we have Mahesh with us. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. I appreciate your introduction. So, Mahesh, thanks again for joining us in the first of the talks that we'll be conducting now on a periodic basis. The folks on the call, I would like to introduce Mahesh. Mahesh is ex RGP India head. For those of you who don't know about RGP Consulting, it's basically present in 150 plus countries, and it consults enterprises on performance and operational excellence. And Mahesh is also advising impact startups and is also investing in impact startups. He is also part of the newly constituted board of Yes Bank. So welcome, Mahesh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be here amongst such a dynamic, high-powered group of entrepreneurs. So it truly is a pleasure for me. And in my interactions in the past and present with entrepreneurs like you, the learning experience for me has been fantastic and energizing. So I have to put that on the table first before we go forward. So again, pleasure. Thanks for having me here. Would you like me to share a few thoughts, Radhesh, before we get into any specifics, details? You tell me how you'd like to conduct this to maximize the benefit and the impact for all of us.
Sure. So if you can share some few thoughts, then I'll ask questions around that, and as well as on your past experiences, how they can be relevant for the startups. Questions around that I'll basically ask. And then we can take up questions from the audience as
well. Sure. I think, Sanjay's introduction was very apt, because some of the things you mentioned, Sanjay, reminded me of the discussion that we had, a little over a month ago, I think, where we, with the senior gentleman from, I believe it was Hindalco, and HDFC Bank, right? We had the CIO from there.
Right.
We had those people there, and then of course we had Ganesh Iyer from .in, and we had several other people there, many entrepreneurs. And I think what you said, Sanjay, reminded me of the conversations that we had there. And I think one of the things that is heartening to see right now is an increasing degree of early collaboration, if you will, between large enterprises in India and startups. And one of my biggest gripes has been that the large companies in India, the enterprises in India, typically, to the points that you mentioned, that you made, Sanjay, tend to be very, very reticent and very risk averse when it comes to hand-holding a startup a little earlier than they might want to otherwise. And I think the propensity to be willing to do that today, I think is a very, very positive development. And perhaps that's an emulation of what we see in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world where that sort of willingness already exists. So it's great to see that. And of course, enterprises have their own expectations. Some of them may be warped, outdated. And to be fair, startups also have their expectations. I mean, enterprises think that entrepreneurs at B2B startups never sleep. You know, they can sleep on 1 hour a day for weeks at a stretch, right? And they thrive only on caffeine, and basically they can perform miracles with the wave of a wand, or that they ought to be the cheapest possible solution that's out there compared to some other people that they may be shopping with. So these are all some of the assumptions that need to be completely disabused as we go. I think that'll happen. Similarly, on the startup side as well, you know, some of us are all guilty, even as entrepreneurs and leaders of startups. We go in there thinking that large enterprises have very deep pockets and are drowning in cash and in money, and that they can keep spending left, right, and center. We also think that, you know, we have the greatest solution that's ever been invented, and so the point contact at the enterprise should be jumping up and down with glee and joy because of what we brought to the table, and so on and so forth. And perhaps even that the enterprise may suffer from a little bit of FOMO, if you will, fear of missing out, because, you know, we as entrepreneurs bring something that they've never seen, or that they don't appreciate fully and understand. So these are all some of the interactions and dynamics I think that we can work through and get over with. And of course, some of us who've been on both sides can relate to both sides and identify with that. Now, having said that, let me just, you know, a couple of interesting things that have evolved very quickly, very dramatically in the last 6 weeks to 2 months. And, you know, I don't want to talk about COVID necessarily and about washing hands and wearing masks. I think we've all had enough of that. But I want to share some thoughts that to my mind represent fundamental long-term structural shifts that I think have transpired and are here to stay, and they're going to be around for a long, long time, maybe permanently. And what do I mean by structural shifts? For example, I'm sure you all saw the recent announcement by TCS that they are going to have perhaps as much as 75% of their workforce work from home. Right now, on the surface, that looks like a very, very simple statement. Okay, TCS is going to do that. They're probably doing that because they want to cut costs. They're probably doing that because it may be good for the environment, whatever those reasons might be. But the fact of the matter is, you know, to my mind, that's like dropping a rock into a pond and creating these massive ripple effects. If you really think about the value chain, the supply chain, the way those ripples that come out of that initial splash affect an entire ecosystem, it's quite mind-boggling. So just think about the fact that you've got builders who've invested and developed these massive workspaces in all these hubs. Bangalore comes to mind, BKC comes to mind, Magarpata city in Pune comes to mind, right? So you look at the ripple effects. You've got these massive buildings that are going to lie vacant. You've got satellite housing, which was created for all the employees of these large corporations. You've got food vendors, you've got restaurants, you've got transportation, you've got shared riding, you've got on and on and on. You've got telecom investments. So the minute you start talking about work from home, and that's not all going to be that easy either. There will be many adjustments. So we can talk about all that, but I think some of these ripple effects, if you will, provide opportunities for those of us who are on this call from a B2B standpoint, and we can try to understand those a little bit better. So you've got structural changes, you've got supply chain impact, you've got environmental impact. I think people are going to become more environmental conscious, CO2 conscious, climate change conscious, become more responsible in their choices. And I'm seeing this because I'm very involved in the ESG space, in the environmental social governance space, where there's significant emphasis on investing into organizations that are highly aware and essentially highly aware and conscious of the business decisions and how those decisions impact the environment and impact quality of life and so on. And therefore, there's a prerogative to integrate those aspects into business models and into business plans and into budgets and so on. So there's that. Then, of course, there's a supply chain issue. I think we've all learned based on this recent pandemic that China plays an incredibly important role for better or for worse. And that's a political discussion. But what has become very apparent is that China is incredibly interlinked in all the shipping lines, shipping linkages, shipping connections, major hubs. So much manufacturing comes from there. And we've seen how these supply chains have been disrupted because of what happened initially in Hubei province in Wuhan and things like that. So again, I think it is going to rearrange the order of priority vis-a-vis how large enterprises especially look at their supply chains. There's going to be more localization. There's going to be more diversification, I think. People are perhaps going to want less of China. We call this COVID an act of God. Some people call it an act of China. Whatever it is, the fact of the matter is people are going to want to mitigate risk, diversify their risks. New collaborations, new vendors, closer to home, things like this. And again, these are all potential B2B impact, favorable B2B impact opportunities, right? Then there's there's several others. There's I would call it the social capital. I think there's going to be significant emphasis on social capital. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about the fact that especially now, more digital connection, less face-to-face connection. So what does that really mean? It has significant ramifications for all of us. Yes, I could go work from home and, I know Sanjay, I know Radhesh, so I can go and work from home and deal with them pretty easily because I already know them. And I'm okay if I don't meet them or see them for weeks on end. And I only see them through digital, right? A screen like this. But on the other hand, if I have new colleagues and if I have people that I've never met before that I need to quickly establish bonds with, how do I do that via a digital only medium? And so these are some major challenges that I think will also emphasize the aspect that I'm talking about, which is the social capital aspect. And there's got to be more trust. I think leaders have got to really step up and deliver more transparency. I think leaders have to be essentially more transparent and talk about what they know and what they don't know, and really bring in the teams and collaborate in a very, very different manner. So there's a social capital aspect of it. And I could go on. There are so this is broadly, we're talking about, I think, more localization, B2B potential, B2B startup potential there. Obviously digital, which is also another opportunity. I think we're going to see many more large enterprises develop what in the industry is referred to as control tower capability. So essentially, the capability to quickly establish hubs that can escalate issues, escalate risks, and in such a manner that those risks and issues can be mitigated and acted upon very quickly. control towers. I think agility is going to become the norm. Agility has become very important. I think enterprises deep down in their hearts and in their souls really want to be as agile and nimble as B2C organizations. And I think they're getting there. And I think many of us around this table today have solutions that would enable them to do that. Business models that are going to be a lot more flexible from a cost standpoint. So ability to scale up, scale down. I think enterprises are going to want that, as are we as entrepreneurs. So these are some of the major trends that I see that offer opportunities as an outgrowth of this very, very difficult time that we're going through right now. But so there is the silver lining here, and I think if we can extend the runways, in conversations with Radhesh, I know we've extended runways. We've taken a look at things that go beyond what Sanjay referred to as introspective, inward-looking, cost-cutting, and so on and so forth. And I have some thoughts on that as well, but we can get into that. So I'll give it back to you, Radhesh, at this point.
Radhesh, can I just come in for 1 minute, for 1 second? Yeah. Mahesh, that was very, very interesting. I also learned, I just heard about the TCS move because one of our founders, CEOs, his wife works for TCS. And if you had taken the word TCS from it and just shared this, one would have thought that it's, some innovative European or let's say American or Valley company. And it was just mind blowing and staggering that it could be TCS. I mean, that this is probably a board level decision. They've thought about it with people like you.
Absolutely.
And we've got a company called TapChief that's the future of work. And in one sense, I like to say that the future of work is already here. It's a precedent because of this, right? Some of our friends and investors and other peers in the Valley are actually saying that, hey, listen, let's jointly think about the tailwinds, right? Not just the next 3 months, 12 months, but let's say irreversible shift, like you're saying, permanent shift. Things that are going to impact the industries. And Radhesh, I think what is interesting about B2B and digital is that it can be global, right? If you look at these supply chain disruptions, I'm sure, Mahesh, if we were sitting in San Francisco or Tokyo or Singapore, we'd be having the exact same discussion because it's a global phenomenon. So the opportunity, coming back to Arka and our companies, is that if they look at these disruptions, I think supply chain is so massive, such as logistics, is whatever is developed for a IT park or something here can apply to the world. That's the beauty of it, right? That's the universal applicability. If you go to the business of backing restaurants and coffee chains, you're really hit. Businesses come to a standstill. But the advantage of digital is it's brought digital to the forefront, which is why I think the timing of the Jio and Facebook deal is even more paramount. So great points. Radhesh, back to you.
Thanks, Mahesh. So I'd like to probably ask some questions which are been from your past avatar. So you have consulted a lot of enterprises on performance and operational excellence. Wanted to understand what are the key parameters that you would look into for an enterprise and say that this particular enterprise is going in the right direction or this particular enterprise is not going in the right direction, and how these parameters can be also relevant for a B2B startup. That was my question.
It's interesting, Radhesh. I think that there's normal state and there's pandemic state, right? And as much as enterprises, large enterprises from the outside appear to be fully in control and very well organized and superbly structured and so on and so forth, the reality is that there are numerous dysfunctionalities, even in large enterprises. They don't have all the answers. They may have deep pockets, they may have lots of resources, but because they're very complex, many of them can be stodgy, many of them could be flat-footed, and because of that, the inertia is immense. And because of this immense inertia, it's very difficult for them to change, and it's very difficult for them to become agile and to become nimble. So for me, and a very important point of reference is the leadership team that sits at the top of any one of these enterprises. And when I say sits at the top, I don't literally mean hierarchically because they're the senior most people there. When I say sit at the top, what I'm talking about is their ability to share their story, share their vision. It's almost, it's very, very similar to that of a startup scenario where you have the founder and the CEO who has to establish a very, very clear purpose and vision, wear that on their sleeve, and ensure that everybody else on the team understands it, has imbibed it, has digested it, and can see that vision, feel that purpose in the same manner. That same requirement exists in large enterprises. So we should never kid ourselves of that. The challenge there, of course, is that you've got more hierarchies. And this is one of the reasons why you're moving towards flatter organizations where you don't have to go through multiple layers. Now, for me, the line of sight is the most important thing. If the CEO at a large enterprise has a very clear line of sight to at least several levels into the organization from where he or she is perched, that to me is a very, very good indicator of that organization being on the right track or not on the right track. When you have a CEO who is completely clueless as to what may be going on deeper in the organization or in one of the subsidiaries that is 10,000 miles away, then I think you have some issues. You have some challenges there. The first step, I think, for a startup to be able to get into one of these organizations is really to try to establish some good friends in those organizations. And we touched on some of this a couple of months ago when we all met. But I think the important thing is, I refer to, I like this term, I call them benevolent bullies. And the reason I say that is because, they can be like bullies. They're big, they're powerful, they're strong, they have big bucks, they have deep pockets, ostensibly, and what they want is what they'll get, right? And oftentimes they may know what they need, they may not know what they need, but they'd like you, the entrepreneur, to believe they know what they need. And so you really have to establish those relationships, and you've got to forge that trust and get in there and figure out who that person might be. The warmer the intro, the easier the inroads to that person, the better, because then you've got some validation, you've got some credibility and some trust that's already been established. But I think once you get in, my recommendation is always to be more consultative. So I may have the greatest solution, I really may, but I wouldn't want to walk in to a decision maker in an enterprise and say, listen, I have this fantastic solution, and I think you should implement it. And I know I'm making this only simplistic, but really to go in there and ask a lot of questions and just keep quiet and listen. I think that's the key, right? So ask a lot of questions, understand the business implications, understand what they're trying to do. Now, we talk about B2B, we talk about B2B to C, there could be B to B to B to C to C, right? I mean, there are multiple layers in this chain. I've always advised startups to really try to understand where that enterprise is going. What are their challenges? What are they trying to do? As opposed to going there and saying, I have the solution, and what can this enterprise do with my solution? So if you look at the current environment, and we talked about opportunities, if you really think about it, I was thinking about, for example, First Hive, one of your portfolio companies, right? First Hive. Now, they do some amazing things. Now, First Hive really traces a customer's behavior across multiple channels, if I understand them correctly, and really what they enable the enterprise to do is to develop a profile of that customer along different touch points, to develop a holistic view of that customer so that customer is well understood, and the marketing can be contextual, targeted, etc., etc., etc. Now, pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID. Now, my contention is that in a post-COVID environment, that customer could be very, very different, right? So for example, you're talking about much less offline, much more online, as an example. So the touch points are going to be predominantly online, right? Now, so that could pose some challenges for people like Prima Seller, right? Where there is a significant retail touch aspect, if I remember correctly. So that's one example. You have customers coming back to First Hive who potentially will be a lot more environmental conscious, which means that they're going to want products that are more green, products that they feel represent responsible choices from their perspectives, whether it's a diaper for their baby or some food that they're going to buy off the supermarket shelf that they're going to consume, right? So what does that mean? So if First Hive has an FMCG company, a large enterprise, be it Unilever or whoever, Unilever is going to be thinking about all these things. Unilever's ultimate selling point is that consumer, right? But for First Hive, Unilever is the client. So now what is Unilever thinking, and what are the changes that are being triggered for Unilever by the market, by the environment? Those are the kinds of things we need to understand. If Unilever doesn't understand those, maybe we can go in there and be more consultative. Maybe we can go in there and have those kinds of discussions as a startup, as the CEO of a startup, go in there and say, Mr. Unilever, Ms. Unilever, these are the things we think are transpiring in the marketplace. How are you thinking about them and what you're doing? And by the way, First Hive can help you get there, right? Potentially. So this is an example of something. Now, similarly, you look at Jovian, right? Jovian is your basically your data scientist environment workflow capability.
For data scientists.
Exactly. Now, given that supply chains are being disrupted, and given that there could be very, very new approaches to how large enterprises, be it in India or in the US or elsewhere, want to reconfigure their supply chains, it's entirely conceivable that the data scientists who are sitting at again, just to pick a Unilever, for example, right, might want to really have some very effective analytical ways of taking the big data that they have there and chiseling that big data into different and novel ways of optimizing the supply chain based on management direction, based on what that enterprise wishes to do with their supply chain, right? So these are some of the opportunities that arise. So now, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but the things that we typically look for are beyond measures, beyond, I always say earnings are an opinion and cash is a fact, right? So just because an organization is making good earnings and delivering good results on their P&Ls and to quarterly analysts doesn't mean that there are no underlying issues that are brewing there. And so I think the best way to go in there is to really be consultative and ask a lot of good questions so that you get their attention and they realize that you understand their business. And you're not just an entrepreneur who's got a great solution, who's walking in there saying, hey, how can I fit this into your enterprise? And how can I fit this to add value to your existing enterprise applications portfolio, technology infrastructure portfolio, and so on.
All right. Thanks, Mahesh. For the audience, you can pose the questions and I can take those questions and ask Mahesh as well. So I'll before I go into the audience, one last question, Mahesh, to you. So basically, you talked about what is the best way to kind of approach an enterprise and basically you said to understand what the need is and based on that, tailor the our pitch to the enterprise and go through a particular warm lead, which is more useful than actually going there, just without any particular introduction. That's going with the warm lead is more helpful. Now, basically, now if startups would want to plan for their, irrespective of the COVID situation. Now, what are the things they need to keep in mind when they are thinking of their best case scenarios and the worst case scenarios? What parameters they need to keep in mind?
In terms of worst case scenarios, it almost gets it's always like Sanjay was saying, it's inward looking, it's introspective. So from a worst case standpoint, you can cut costs, you can renegotiate contracts, you can get rid of certain contracts, you can try to get some leeway on your rents, you can basically look forward to some very, very late and hopefully not inadequate government help that'll be hopefully coming down the road. I understand that the government is looking at ways of helping startups. This could be, some flexibility around PFs, flexibility around advanced tax payments, and so on and so forth. My principle in life has always been to look at any cost cutting vis-a-vis people to be the last option. Okay, that should always be the very last option. I think one can look at cutting capex spending. One can look at many, many other alternatives that sit either on the balance sheet or in the P&L that would represent a tightening of the belt and extending of the runway and improving cash flow in the short term. And obviously, these are things that should be ongoing anyway, regardless of good times, bad times, worst case, best case scenario. Right now, today we're faced with essentially what I would refer to as a force majeure scenario, where whatever's happened is truly unpredictable. It was not expected. And many aspects of contracts may or may not be delivered on time. So in this environment, I would encourage all the startups that are sitting here in this meeting to really focus on 3, 4, 5 fundamental things. One would be to provide a very, very strong sense of assurance or reassurance to their clients, to instill confidence in them, in those enterprises, that, hey, listen, we're good, we're here, we're still doing well, we're going to be around for a long, long time. Right? I think that's extremely important, and it's important to have that communication, and one cannot over communicate on that. Right? So that's critical. So it's very important not to just sort of go off and sit in a corner and assume that everybody thinks you're doing just fine and that you're there for them. I think it's important to reinforce that message time and again. I think it's probably very important to revisit roadmaps that may have been agreed to and that may have been set with your enterprise client, and to make sure that, to be very upfront, if there are going to be delays, share those concerns, share those risks with them, be very open. Forge stronger ties with your key stakeholder or key stakeholders. Use this opportunity to strengthen bonds with them. I can tell you, I've been spending a lot of time doing this with ex-clients, very senior people who I can tell you are feeling very lonely at the moment. Many of them are very lonely and just want people to talk to because they're just feeling very besieged, and many of them are feeling they're in crisis management. And many of them are working much harder now and are far more stressed now than they may have been when things are going really well. So, there are these human elements that I think become extremely important. I would also say, going back to a point we just discussed a few minutes ago, that I think it's very, very important to keep one's ears to the ground, right? So even if you are maintaining significant contact and having extensive communication with your stakeholders at the enterprise, the fact is there may be some hidden agendas that they are not quite willing to share with you at this point in time. So the challenge is for you, in a very positive context, the challenge is for you to cull those, to glean those, extract those thoughts from your stakeholders, have them talk, ask some good questions, and have them speak to you, right? So you'll understand a little bit better as to what they may be thinking in terms of, the B2B, B2B to B2C, B2C, whatever those links are in their chain. How are they reacting to those changes? 2 steps removed, 3 steps removed from where they sit from a business perspective, right? So I think that becomes very important. I would also say that, in some environments this may sound crazy, but I think it is perfectly okay for a startup to drop bad clients. Okay, so if they are able to do that, if a client is overly expensive, high maintenance, not delivering much revenue, and is essentially a drain on resources and time and energy and effort, drop that client. There are ways of doing it nicely, and there are ways of doing it without shutting the door completely either, right? So that's something else that I think should be looked at.
A little bit about that.
And there are other things. For example, take a look at the long-term lifetime value of a customer, right? So if the cost of acquiring a customer is, very mathematical, simple. If a cost of acquiring a customer is less than or equal to the lifetime value of that customer, then maybe you're onto something. But if the cost of acquiring that customer is more than the lifetime value of that customer, then it doesn't matter if you grow by 300% every year. The fact of the matter is, it's a losing proposition, right?
You mentioned about without being on the place talking to customers.
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed you.
You mentioned that there are ways to drop the customers. You can talk a little bit about what are the ways in which startups can tell no to customers, which is not very profitable, turning out to be very unviable proposition for startup.
I think the obviously it depends a lot on the significance of that customer. If that customer represents, it's the 80-20 rule, right? So typically if there are 5 customers, then usually 4 out of those 5 add marginal value. One of them is significant and adds significant value. Now, if that 20% is represented by the most significant customer, enterprise customer in the portfolio, then we have some issues. We have some problems. And I think the only way out of that is to really sit down with them with great sincerity, with good intentions, transparency, and say, hey, listen, you guys are killing us, and here's why you're killing us, right? This is not viable for us. And please understand why, and here's why. And because you're a great partner, we love you, we know you love us. This is why we're talking to you and opening up to you so frankly. If they don't respond to that, then you've already set it up for any subsequent steps that you may be willing to take, right? They shouldn't be surprised. The most important thing is to have communications going so that nobody is surprised. So if this communication has already happened, and even better, if it has happened repeatedly on a few occasions, then that enterprise stakeholder is probably thinking, maybe they're going to ditch me, right? And now, assuming you are going to ditch and drop them, the most important thing to keep in mind is that you're not going to do it in such a way that it's a mission critical scenario, and by pulling the plug on whatever you're doing for them, the business is going to come to a standstill. If that were the case, then they would most certainly stand up and listen very attentively to your gripes and your complaints, right? And if that's not the case, then so be it. All the easier to just pull out of that situation. And so what I would say here is that, especially in the current environment, I think one positive step that one could take is really to minimize churn, try to avoid losing customers as the number one priority rather than going after new ones. In this environment, I think to begin with, dealing with enterprises involves very long cycles and involves long conversations, long time to closure, and so on and so forth, right? So because of that, I think it's almost better to spend more time and invest more time on existing clients and to strengthen the bonding with those clients by delivering better service, by making it easier to do business with you. I mean, this could involve anything from customer support to making it easier for the billing department in dealing with you as the startup, to being highly responsive, improving the robustness of the solution that's being delivered, right? So these are all improving security, improving the robustness, improving the just the quality of what's being done, and improving the client experience. I think these are all things that can be done to risk mitigate on the churning side. But on the other hand, it is entirely possible that in an environment like this, you lose customers, right? And more than likely, the customers that one tends to lose are those that are least attentive to their external environment and collaborations and third parties. This is what I've seen as well. If an organization is not attentive, and if an organization does not take good care of people who are in their supply chain, Walmart is an example of this. I mean, they've always been the 800-pound gorilla in the marketplace, right? Where they've bullied their supply chain to no end, and eventually, they woke up and they realized that was not a sustainable way of doing things. So I think large organizations, large enterprises will understand fully well if a very talented entrepreneurial startup that is delivering value to them, high value to them, goes in and says, hey, listen, you guys are killing us. And here's why. So, you've got to help us help you, right? If you keep killing us, we won't be here to help you anymore. Very valid conversation.
Thanks, Mahesh, on this. Any questions from the audience? I guess maybe there's nothing.
Radhesh, can I just add to that? Mahesh, you made a very interesting point some time back when you said reach out and people have time. And I found that, because my role is almost entirely externally facing. And it's very interesting. I found that in normal times, the emails that I'm dealing with a peer or the managing partner, whoever it is, and emails are floating back between their EAs and mine for about 2 months. And I had a CEO ping me and said, Sanjay, I have time. Can we chat? Would love to hear about your portfolio companies in the second week of this. I think we're finding in an incredible way that this has been an equalizer for better or for worse. Whatever we do, we're all sitting in our pixels in front of each other, bare bones, like the way people see it. So we're seeing a tremendous sense of empathy. We have calls with investors in San Francisco every evening. And I think there's two things. I think we're all in this together. We're all learning together at the same time. There is nobody who has proprietary asymmetric information about this than anybody else, right?
True.
So I think that's interesting. And they're very interested in reaching out and finding out, if we are investors and this is the way it's going, which are those companies that are going to help do this, exactly like you said. On customers also, I feel that it's a great time to keep those customers close to your chest and close to you, because and almost move from sales mode to empathize mode, right? Of course, upsell to sell more, but I just see a tremendous sense of human connection and empathy coming out across because you band together. So I think it's a great time, and I've been just telling founders that reach out. You'll be surprised. I tweeted also that actually in this time you're finding people are actually even more empathetic and willing to give more time versus less.
Absolutely.
Sharing and hearing.
Very much so, Sanjay. I mean, this is what I was referring to in terms of social capital. I think some of these changes will be permanent. I think people will realize that the ROI will be far better if you're kinder and gentler with the people that you deal with and the people that you work with, and you empathize more. Yeah. Right. I think that's becoming very important.
So, so in the realm of B2B, to make the question a little sharper and more relevant, what does it do to, let's say, remote sales, right? I mean, let's call it Zoom sales, but remote sales and also managing a remote sales force, those two things, right? How would that change if this behavior is going to be like semi-permanent?
My sense, Sanjay, on that is that I think certainly to start with, B2B enterprises, B2B startups already do have a bit of an advantage in that they can do more remote selling than other businesses can, in terms of having to be out there, physically be out there, travel physically, and so on and so forth. So that I think that I don't think that has changed, and I don't think that'll change. However, I think that we need to avoid falling into the trap of thinking that now everything is digital. Everything can be done through a computer screen. So I don't need to go and meet so and so. I think we should avoid falling into that trap, because I've always been a believer in one-on-one interface, one-on-one contact, at least initially, and then intermittently. I think that's vitally important, for the very reason that we are going to be, I think, practicing and experiencing more isolation in many ways going forward, and people are going to start thinking that in the interest of productivity and in the interest of cutting costs, let's limit everything to digital interaction. And I think that would be a big mistake. So I think it still is going to be very important eventually to get onto a plane and to go meet someone in Silicon Valley, in San Fran, or in Palo Alto, or wherever, to have those conversations and to give people the chance to look and see and feel, right? So that's very important. The other thing I think is that I think the days of hard selling are going to be over. This is my feeling. My sense is that the hard sale is really not going to sit well in many ways, and I think the reason I say that is because there's going to be an overall recalibration of what does growth mean. I think people are going to be quite happy if one's quality of life improves, the air is better out there, is cleaner out there, and I'm more healthy and less stressed and get to spend more time with my family. If I achieve 15% growth instead of 25% growth, so I think there's going to be this attitude change and attitude shift. Of course, we as Homo sapiens tend to have very short memories, but my sense is that some of these old habits which we've always thought die hard, I think are going to wane and morph into something a little different. So from that perspective, I think there will be more patience. I think people will be willing to accept a little slower delivery time, response time. I think people will be willing to take a longer term view, and this goes to institutional investors, this goes to VCs, this goes to hedge funds, sovereign funds, and so on and so forth, who I think will take a longer term view vis-a-vis return on capital. And so from that standpoint, I think it all augurs very, very well. So I don't know if that's a long-winded response to what you asked, Sanjay, but I think that the notion of selling is going to be very different. I think inbound marketing in many ways, I think, could be more powerful going forward than aggressive outbound selling and outbound marketing. It's almost this more subtle, but nevertheless in your face, as opposed to in your face. It's very different. So I think some of those things will help a lot, especially for B2B enterprises. And the one other thing is, we always forget to get our own clients, to leverage our own clients, and to get our own clients to speak for us. So if we have an enterprise client who's very happy with what we're doing for them, then why not get them to be ambassadors for us and use them as an extension, a goodwill ambassador. So these are some of the things that I think will become alternative ways for business development and sales.
Hey Mahesh, thank you so much for taking time out. Lots of interesting thoughts that you've shared. And hi. And kind of concur with what you're saying on what you mentioned about First Hive earlier in the call, where you said that, look, all companies across the board will basically see this swing towards more and more digital interactions with customers, and they're kind of being forced to adopt to that new reality post-COVID. And so in a way, we at First Hive are also seeing this as a potential opportunity, because we sit at the heart of that transformation that enterprises take. And so, although right now what we are experiencing is that our new funnel has slowed down dramatically, we are seeing interest from folks to talk to us and understand about the product. So we are having I think more conversations around the product functionality, and we are hoping that we will be able to position ourselves well and seed conversations that will allow us to kind of participate in the opportunities as the market kind of starts back again, because we think that enterprises which were, so to say, on the fence on how quickly they need to adopt a CDP solution like ours will see acceleration in that adoption, and therefore we want to be there. One thing that we are seeing is that there is a slight difference in different markets and of course different industries. While US has slowed down a lot more, we see that India still seems to be a lot more open, especially the non-auto and the non-physical distribution or retail related entities. So, for example, we've actually been very encouraged by one win that we had 2 weeks back, and in fact today we just have another confirmation of another win. Small win, small foot in the doors, but these have been really encouraging. So we see that the Indian market is responding slightly differently compared to the US market, and even Southeast Asia, the doors are beginning to open back for conversations. So that's something that we are seeing. It's still early days to claim anything, but it's we're just seeing a difference.
No, congratulations on your 2 wins. That's fantastic. It's wonderful news. Very happy to hear that. I think that's great. I think the challenge, and again, it depends on who the client is and so on. But I think the challenge in India for you, Aditya, would revolve around your staying power with that client. I think you need to make sure that they are not just experimenting with you. I think you need to make sure that you think through the way they may be thinking things through, and also maybe help them think through what they would need to do with regard to the what we talked about earlier, which has to do with the one step removed, 2 step removed phenomenon, where they've got whatever it is that they're selling, and they've got their consumers that they'd like to profile, but are they focusing on the right sectors? Are they looking at sectors with staying power? Are they looking at sectors that are going to grow? Are they looking at something that's only transitory as opposed to, or transient as opposed to more permanent in terms of consumer behaviors, consumer behavioral changes, things like that? You may want to help them with that, and they probably need that help.
True. No, I agree. I think with regards to the staying power, I think the biggest pressure that we are seeing across the board, though, right now is one of cash flows, which is less a churn risk and really more our capability to manage our working capital. For example, our usual account receivable days is about 55 days, 45 to 55 days, and right now it's gone up to about 75 days, and we are seeing that change. So we are clearly seeing cash, especially in the Indian market. US not so much, but India definitely we are seeing cash flow pressures. So we've obviously taken a few steps, including the ones that you mentioned, like renegotiating contracts, not looking at any single contract as a holy cow, and kind of going back and seeking support or renegotiating. We've renegotiated our rent. We've also had a number of our team members kind of step up and work with us to taking a cut for the next 6 months. These are proactive steps that we've taken to be in a position to not have to let go. We've communicated and over communicated to our teams that we will carry everybody through this, so that we hopefully assuage some of the concerns of our team members across the board. Uh, uh, the only concern, I guess, remains that if economic activity stays shut beyond a certain threshold, then we may hit an inflection point where a lot of things may unravel, in which case then we may see a churn risk, which we think is really more like a 4 to 6 month kind of a lockdown, which probably is unlikely. So if that doesn't happen, and if we start seeing economic activity pick up, let's say from June or July, then we're hoping that we should be able to see this through.
That's, I mean, and of course we're all with you. We all hope all this works out nicely. The only thing I would say there is to come to your own assessment. Make your own assessment on the viability of your client, right? So strategically, are they on the right path? Do they have a solution for the marketplace that is viable, that is sustainable, that gives them legs and gives them something unique? Are they solving a unique problem in the marketplace? And therefore, will they grow, and will they have significant opportunities for growth? I think if the answers to those questions are yes, for me, that would be the bigger question to answer. And then it becomes more a matter of figuring out some short-term tactical ways of navigating the storm, if you will, and holding their hands and riding through the storm with them until they emerge into bright blue skies, right? So, but on the other hand, if you were to tell me that, yeah, they're great, they're doing fine at the moment, but not really sure that that they're on the right path or that they're going to survive, either because, you know, they will be shutting down, or because what they have is not something that has legs and that will enable them to grow, then you have a different decision to look at. So you know, one of the things that I think that becomes very crucial in this environment is there are three factors that all combine to really make it potent from a decision standpoint. One is to figure out quickly what the size of the situation, right? Whether it's with a client or whether it's with your own internal operations or whatever. Size up the situation very quickly. Figure out the extent of that change that needs to be made. You know, the magnitude of the change. How significant does the change have to be? And again, this could be vis-a-vis clients, or this could be vis-a-vis your own internal operations. And third, and this goes hand in hand with the first two, is to react very quickly. And don't delay decisions. So, you know, size up the situation, figure out how much of a change is going to be triggered or necessitated through that sizing up process, and then implement the change quickly. And I think the speedier you can be with that, the more decisive you can be with that, the greater the survivability rate for yourself and for your clients. And this is a good recipe for your clients as well, for that matter.
True. No, I agree. Thank you for that, Mahesh. And once again, thank you so much for all of the thoughts. Some
good luck with everything. Good luck with everything. Congrats on the 2 wins. That's good.
Thanks.
No, sure. That really motivated a lot of the team members as well. The sales guys were very enthused.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
in this environment, to be able to get that win was a big morale booster.
It is, and it shows, right? It shows that you still can win even when there are opportunities. Right. Difficult.
Of course,
challenges.
I mean, I have to confess, we gave much more aggressive pricing than we normally would.
Okay.
But nevertheless, as long as the deals were positive, net positive, and we were able to put in some upfront cash flows, we still went for it. So
and just make sure that the lifetime value of that customer is going to be greater than whatever you're spending on them.
Oh yeah, it is. That our deals are almost always, you know, our ACVs to CAC itself have a multiple of more than 2 or 3, not just the LTVs.
Great, good.
Thanks, Aditya. Thank you, Mahesh, for sharing your thoughts, and thank you, Sanjay, for being on the call. And
my pleasure.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thanks on behalf of Radhesh and Arka for being on. And I see your coat hanger next to you. So here's looking to next time meeting in blazers somewhere when this is okay in different times.
This is my home office.
Yeah.
So
but we can all get out. So
yeah, looking forward to that.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And good luck to everybody, and all the very best. And looking forward to seeing you all sometime soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.